Oh, I am. Let's open in a word of prayer. Lord, thank you for this day. We pray that you will bless our time together today. Probably pray that you will help us to always keep in mind that regardless of the situation that's in the world, that we have an obligation to live sanctified, holy lives and always be ready to give an answer for the hope that lies within us. And we pray that you will always help us to keep that in mind, even though the world can be a bit troubling at times. Bless us today in Jesus' name, amen. Well, today we're going to talk about seeing it coming. And I think you'll understand a little bit about where I'm going with that in a few minutes. These are some of the platforms that we're on. We talk, as I say, every week about the acceleration and convergence of events. It's just not possible to cover everything. I was talking to Pastor Brandon or texting with him the other day, and I said, you know that things are happening quickly when the shelf life for your update that you spend hours and hours and hours and days preparing expires in about 24 hours some weeks. It's just not relevant anymore because things have changed that. And things are happening very, very rapidly. This is sort of the grid that I look at: acceleration, convergence, logistics, and understanding. We'll talk a little bit about these, that there's this passage in Daniel chapter 11 that talks about at the end. Now, we can argue about when the end is. I think the end is at the time of the end, which is where we are today. The words are closed up and sealed till the time of the end. Many shall be purified and made white and tried, but the wicked shall do wickedly, and none of the wicked shall understand, but the wise shall understand. And that's also in Daniel 11. It says, they that understand among the many shall instruct many. Now, this is a chart I haven't used for a while, and the purpose I put it up is not to get into an argument with somebody about whether this last period of time is 7 years or 3.5 years. We know that the Antichrist rule will be 1,260 days. That's got to, if it's a 7-year period, that's going to be in that last half of period after he goes into he commits the abomination of desolation, which my understanding is based on 2 Thessalonians 2 and Jesus in Matthew chapter 24 and Daniel in Daniel chapter 11 and elsewhere, that he will go into this temple, this holy place, and declare himself above all that is called God. And then he will rule for 1,260 days. And he'll have opposition. There will be people that will attack him. But the other thing is, and this is kind of I don't know if it should be, but it is a controversial area. We see these seals, the 7-sealed scroll that's open in Revelation. And the first 4 are, the white horse, the black horse, the red horse, and the pale horse. And there's things associated with them. For example, I believe with I'm trying to remember exactly the phraseology that's used in the all right, where did my hang on a second here. I had my passage all pulled up, and then somebody must have taken it away. Okay, for example, and what you need to understand is that what my understanding of this is that these seals of Revelation, they open. Now, there's no time stamp that it says it opens here, and then there's this much time, and then the second one opens, then the next one opens, then the fourth one opens, particularly with the 4 horsemen that come, the 4 horses that come forth. And there's a dispute in the prophecy community. Some people say that some of the seals are already opening. Part of that is based on the fact that, well, things are getting kind of bad in the world. At least it appears. I mean, we're on the verge this week, people I read and talked to said this was far worse than the Cuban Missile Crisis. I remember that. I was 8 years old. And I remember asking my mother, are we going to have nuclear war? And she said, in the way my mother only could be. Deal with it. Go crawl under your desk if you want to, or your bed. No, she didn't say that. But it was stressful. I could see the stress of my parents. I could see the stress of adults around me, as we didn't know whether there was going to be thermonuclear war. And this week, I played you clips of Putin 5 years ago. I saw Sergei Lavrov, and I saw Putin this week saying, we'll use nukes if we have to. Now, the West doesn't seem to be willing to do that. That's why they don't want to get into that kind of a battle. But Putin says that he will do it. And I believe him, unfortunately. But understand that these seals are the way they open, and then the effect of them are progressive. For example, it doesn't say that the first seal opens and everything in the first seal happens, then the second seal opens. So, let's just read the passage. And I saw when the Lamb opened one of the seals, and I heard, as it were, the noise of thunder, one of the four beasts saying, "Come and see." This is Revelation chapter 6. And I saw, and behold, a white horse, and he that sat on him had a bow, and a crown was given unto him. And he went forth conquering and to conquer. So do you see how the wording is used there? He goes forth conquering and to conquer. That's a participle, that implies that this happens over a period of time. It's not like the seal opens and he's conquered everything. You understand? They're wars. And then you see that. You see when he had opened the second seal, I heard the second beast say, "Come and see." And there went out another horse that was red, and power was given to him that sat thereon to take peace from the earth, and that they should kill one another, and there was given unto him a great sword. And when he had opened the third seal, I heard the third beast say, "Come and see." And I beheld, and lo, a black horse, and he that sat on him had a pair of balances in his hand. And I heard a voice in the midst of the four beasts saying, "A measure of wheat for a penny, and 3 measures of barley for a penny, and see that thou hurt not the oil and the wine." And when he had opened the fourth seal, I heard the voice of the fourth beast say, "Come and see." And I looked, and behold, a pale horse, and his name that sat on him was Death, and hell followed with him. And power was given over them, over the fourth part of the earth, to kill with the sword, and with hunger, and with death, and with the beasts of the earth. And then it goes on to describe the fifth seal, and the sixth and seventh. But my view, and by the way, I disagree with a lot of people that say that the fourth seal, the pale horse, a fourth of mankind is killed. I do not read the text to say that. It says, and power was given over them, over the fourth part of the earth, to kill with sword and with... So the power is over the fourth part of the earth. And the power is up to execution and killing with the sword. It's also interesting in Revelation chapter 6, verse 4, that it talks about the red horse, and power was given to him that sat thereon to take peace from the earth, and that they should kill one another, and there was given unto him a great sword. Now, the word there, the Greek word, has a meaning, and I'll take you back. The meaning of the word is, it can mean like a dagger. It can mean a short sword or a really long sword. But I'm just going to suggest to you, and I don't know that this is what John had in mind, but this is a animation. I've played this starting probably almost 3.5 years ago. This is a hypersonic missile that Russia has developed. And Putin this week was saying, I might use hypersonic missiles. I have hypersonic missiles, and you have no defense to them. And the answer is, and by the way, this is sort of where you look, this is these missiles hitting Florida, which was done back in 2018 when a certain president lived at least part-time in Florida. And so this was an announcement that he made at a big annual meeting, and people cheered, clapped and cheered, we're going to take out these places. And honestly, the U.S. does not have a defense to hypersonic missiles. Russia doesn't have a defense to hypersonic missiles. We talk about missile defense. This is one of the issues that's sort of playing into the Ukrainian invasion, that the U.S. has what the U.S. claims are missile defense systems that have been put in some of the old Eastern European countries that are now part of Europe, of NATO. Putin views those as offensive weapons. And I showed you last week, or the week before, the American Physical Society, a group of physics, their analysis of U.S. and other missile defense technologies that have been deployed around the world. And their conclusion was these things don't work. If North Korea, if we did put our best missile defense system out there right now, and North Korea unleashed four ballistic missiles, it would completely overwhelm anything that we have. So if the missile systems don't work, then maybe Putin is correct that they're more of a offensive weapon that's being put there, and he doesn't like that on his border. And because some of these are very close, 100 kilometers or so from some major Russian cities. And we'll talk a little bit about that. But it's interesting that the name of the missile, the hypersonic missile, is Kinzhal, which means dagger. Now, this could be just mere coincidence. It could also mean that somebody in the Kremlin or the Russian Ministry of Defense thought, we're going to get all those Bible prophecy teachers really upset, and we're going to use the word dagger because we know that that's the way that the Greek word there, a great sword, could be interpreted. And so they're going to get, this is apocalyptic, this is the third, the red, the second seal, the red horse. But sometimes these things are not coincidences. They happen this way. So we need to be careful. But so going back to my, hang on a second here. I'm not sure what's going on here. Great, I'm not getting my, oh no. Hang on a second here. I'm going to have to shut down my PowerPoint and reopen it back up because I'm just not. Okay. It's not operating the way that it should be. So so these seals, when they do open, they open, but it may be that the ultimate impact of everything that will happen because of that seal, there we go, that happens in that seal, it's a progressive thing. It unfolds over time. And again, there's no time stamp on these that it starts here within that last 7-year period, or some people think before. It just doesn't say exactly when it starts. It's probably going to start, let's say it's within that 7-year period, as a lot of us think. It's going to start pretty early in that period. But how quickly do they unfold and open? That's up to question, and that leads to a bit of controversy. But understand that what happens here is that these things, when they do unfold, there's an, why am I not getting anything on my? Okay, folks, I'm sorry for this. Brian, do you have any signal back there for the video? I never rebooted. You have nothing since I started? Okay, I'm going to reboot my computer, folks. So I'm going to talk here for a moment. And I did not, you don't need to know all that. Okay, and that's the way that these things happen in Bible prophecy, is that there's an incrementalism to them. And as I mentioned, as part of the sort of grid work that I have, is that there's a logistics part to this. So when I get back up, I'm going to talk a little bit about what's going on with things that seem to be related to the mark of the beast. And with regard to the mark of the beast, we can see how there is a lot of things being done in the world to implement that in many different ways. For example, there have been, we know that what happened with the protest of the truckers in Canada, that they came through, and part of that was because of the way that was being implemented. People did not like that, and people are, I think, legitimately concerned about this. People are concerned about the mark of the beast. And if you're a deep student of the Bible, you know that taking the mark of the beast is a bad thing to do. You should not take the mark of the beast, because you can be damned for all eternity for taking the mark of the beast. And so that is, and so that's a big issue. And there are people that teach that, you can take the mark of the beast and still be saved. I think that that's a grave error. But let's talk about that a little bit. So see how this incrementalism happens in our world. So we talk about this, the Charlie Vector 019er thing and the state-approved treatment for it. And there have been protests about that. There's a big trucker protest going on in America right now, protesting the way that they have handled this. Things have changed on this. So this is down in New Zealand. Down in New Zealand, Jacinda Ardern came out a month or so ago and said, we're going into the red zone, which meant everything is shut down. Now, New Zealand has way above 90% of the people have received the state-approved treatment for Charlie Vector 019er. But what's the problem in New Zealand? They're having tens of thousands of cases a day of people coming down with Charlie Vector 019er. Well, now, what does that tell you about the state-approved treatment? Is it working or not? And they shut everything down. She even came out, I think I mentioned this, she came out and said, Brian, something is not working on this today. My what? My.
Unplug this.
Okay.
Either one of them?
Usually.
All right.
Put it in the front one, closest to me.
I'm going to flip it over and put it in the front one. I have another one of these back there. I'll bring it up. Mike, bring me the pack. There we go. We have a backup one back here.
Okay. So, sorry for the tech. So in New Zealand, they put in this red thing. The prime minister I mentioned, she canceled her wedding. And I don't have a lot of respect for her, to be honest with you. She's a totalitarian. She's one of the worst. She's one of these World Economic Forum, Young Global Leader graduates. And my thinking was, boy, the guy that, his wedding to her was canceled, he's like the luckiest guy ever. But have you seen how the narrative shifted? I mean, President Biden was doing headbutts with people with no covering on his face the other night at the State of the Union. And by the way, not too much comments about that. But did you see Nancy Pelosi when he was talking about burn pits in Iraq? She's rubbing her hands together and getting, what is going on? It's almost like you're watching someone who's possessed. And you would have to really work hard to convince me that that is not the case. It was totally inappropriate. And you can't say, well, she just got her applause, she got the wrong applause line on her prompter. It was unbelievable. I mean, and as somebody said, I don't think there was anything in that speech that was true or that this is what he really believed. And that was the part you could understand. It was, in the context of this looming war, really war that's in process, and people are looking to him, us, as the leader of the free world, do you think that over in Russia that they're concerned at all that much about us with that kind of leadership? But the narrative changed. How about now? This is one I made up. This is not an actual milk carton that I saw at Kroger the other day. I think that's pretty good, right? And missing. Where did he go? It's not like he's on vacation, but there are a whole bunch of documents released this week from Health and Human Services. You can go to Blaze Media and read those. But a couple things have happened. There's been this push for digital identity. This comes from the World Economic Forum website, and I really do not have time to go into this today, but understand that where this may be going relates to digital identity and cryptocurrency. I had a very wonderful email, very thorough email about how this digital identity may be used with cryptocurrency. Now, the crypto people will say, well, it's totally secure, that could never happen, but what happened in Canada? Victoria Freeland, the Deputy Prime Minister, Finance Minister, came in and she made announcements, and they grabbed cryptocurrency. Now, there's probably a way to protect that, but do you think these people are going to not try to get away around it and grab your cryptocurrency if you want? And this is what was so troubling about what they did in Canada, was because they just removed people from the financial system completely because they were saying something that the government didn't agree with. They were working with people in our government. And around the same time, our government comes out with this bulletin for the Department of Homeland Security that says we need to shut down misinformation, disinformation, and malinformation, which was related to people's expressing different opinions about the treatment, cause, origin, whatever, of Charlie Vector 019er that differ from the official narrative, which Blaze Media documents now show that Health and Human Services paid over $1 billion to these big media companies to advertise their position. But if you send $25, you understand, if you send $50 to an account to support the truckers who are opposing this, you're financially nuked. So we can go through the pros and cons of what's happening with regard to the financial sanctions that have been unleashed by the West on Russia, on their finance system. They're kind of spotty, but they're seizing oligarchs' yachts and that type of thing. People who are worth billions and billions and billions of dollars are having their yachts seized. So they lose a $500 million yacht. So they're worth $30 billion Now they're worth 29.5 billion. Do you think it really impacts their lifestyle? And they're not shutting down, they're not shutting down the sale of oil and gas. And so did anybody notice this week that the price of gasoline at the pump went up a bit? Now, I know this will sound, people that listen in overseas in the UK and New Zealand and Australia and in Israel, I'll tell them, we're reeling from the price of the cost of a price of the gallon of gas. I mean, a week ago, I found it for $2.71. Same gas station this week, or Costco was $3.49. And every place else is $3.79, $3.89. And people I know in California, they're paying $6, $7 a gallon. I heard a pastor talking the other day. He says, just to drive to church cost me $7 now. And he doesn't live that far away. And he may have I don't know if he has a big SUV or not. I don't really care. That's fine if he wants to do that. But things have changed. And then, the cost of a liter is going through the roof. And so, I mean, in England, UK, and elsewhere, they're paying $8, effectively $8, $9 a gallon for gas now. That begins to impact people. Now, as the price of a barrel of oil goes up, and Russia is one of the biggest suppliers of oil in the world, what impact does that have on Russia? If they're still getting the money, finding a workaround of the financial situation. So oil's gone from 80, now it's up to 120, could go to 140, $150 a barrel. Well, the sanctions are increasing the cost to us, and the producer, one of whom is Russia, gets extra money, and that's how he finances the war. So, I mean, he's not out of pocket. I don't think he's out of pocket anything. And I'm not saying I agree with him or even like him, but you think he probably planned this to happen this way? And so what's happening, though, is that the financial sanctions thing that they rolled out on the truckers in Canada just a couple weeks ago, they're now rolling out on a major it's not the biggest economy in the world. It's the state of Florida has a bigger economy than Russia. Do you know that? The state of Florida. But it's still, they're punching way above their financial weight class, in my view, because they've put it all in weapons and technology, some of which we cannot match. And they're financing the war this way. But now they're taking the financial sanctions and removing Russia from the financial system. And you see there's, basketball teams are not invited to tournaments and that sort of thing. Like, I'm sure, President Putin is sitting there, I'm going to stop what I'm doing because the boys, 16 and under basketball team is excluded from the international basketball championships. Or the women's hockey team can't go play in the international championships. He doesn't care about that. But the concerning thing, and whether you agree with that's the way to approach it or not, is that it's the incremental thing that they're doing. And that this is what will happen in Revelation 13 when the beast is on the scene, has power, and the false prophet will roll out this mark without which you cannot buy or sell. But the beast is not here yet, but it's coming. And so what we're seeing, though, is this goes back to the logistics of what I talk about a lot, is that it doesn't appear overnight. It's not magic. there is a base that's built, and it increases. And then this is a KPMG Australia report on the future of extended reality. You can download it from the internet. My friend in New Zealand sent it to me, and I appreciate him doing that. Because this all relates to the metaverse. I'm still part of a law firm, and so I watch what goes on in law firms. And I can tell you this, everybody says, oh, the metaverse, it'll never happen, it's not that big a deal. But listen, the ESG things that they're rolling out with regard to how to evaluate companies as part of the 2030 the UN's 2030 Sustainable Development Goals, environment, social, and governance, diversity, equity, inclusion scores that are being given to companies. This is all being rolled out at the same time, and law firms all over have practice groups. So what's a practice group? A practice group, or I think they're calling them service lines now. It's lawyers who acquire a lot of knowledge. It might be intellectual property. Now they have ESG practice groups. They have DEI practice groups. They have diversity, equity, and inclusion training in law firms. Now you're coming into, here is KPMG, a big international accounting firm and financial consulting firm, that's saying the future of extended reality. They're starting practice groups in law firms for the metaverse. How are we going to handle metaverse real estate transactions? These are totally digital. How are we doing metaverse probate? How are we doing metaverse divorces? People that get married in virtual reality. Now, I know you're laughing, but law firms don't do that unless they can make money at it. I know. And I know there's another lawyer sitting out here, and he can say amen or not if he wants to, but lawyers only do that if it's real, or if they think they can make money at it. And so back in the Y2K days, there were Y2K practice groups all over the place. And there were big meetings with government people who were working on that issue. It was not, whether it was true or not, there were government agencies dedicated to solving what their tech people perceived to be a potential problem. And nothing happened, so that's nothing. But understand, people made a lot of money off of that in terms of putting this out. So here are some of these predictions. Here's number 1. 10 predictions on extended reality and XR and the metaverse. Look at this. The Mars landing by 2026 will be a watershed moment for XR as viewers step with the first astronaut onto Mars. Wow. Go down to number 2. Digital, see, here's what I'm telling you. This is an accounting firm. Digital real estate, currencies, and other assets in the metaverse will be commonly included in wills. Down to number 3, please. By 2030, and this is this date that's used by everybody, so that's 8 years away now. By 2030, people will spend more physical conscious time in the metaverse than the real world. And the financial value of the metaverse will start to challenge the financial value of physical world assets. People will commonly apply for jobs, earn a living, shop, meet friends, and even get married in the metaverse. Go up to number 4, just a little bit up there. By 2030, the flat screen keyboard and a mouse will disappear and be replaced by wafer-like glasses and contact lenses for spatial collaboration across the multidisciplines. A new control interface will evolve, and I'm telling you, you will get my trackball when you pry it from my cold, dead fingers, okay? I love this thing. had a partner, and she goes, what's that ball thing for? And she's trying to, I said, use your thumb. It's what separates us from the lower, the apes. And she just could, bless her heart, could not figure it out. By 2030, here's 2030 again, customer service will be delivered by digital humans for shopping and other activities and remote support with overlaid information in XR. Number 6, by 2030, synthetic data generated from simulated worlds will guide robots to problem solve and save humans from high-risk work. No more falling off my step when you deliver a package. Number 7, access to higher education will become more democratized and delivered on a virtual campus with digitized assets such as museums as a service. Let's hope. Do you think higher education is going to improve when this happens? They'll just say there's probably going to be less accountability. Number 8, by 2030, human thoughts will be able to be tracked, recorded, and influenced with XR and brain-computer interfaces, giving rise to privacy-focused regulation. Brain power will be used for decision-making rather than for memorization. So, hide his word in your heart will become something that's not necessary. And folks, go out to Beach Road, south of 161, New Albany, and drive down that road someday. Have any of you done it? Drive down the road and see the big server farms out there. And understand to the west will be Google spending $2.5 billion. To the east of that Facebook server farm, Intel is spending $20 billion to $100 billion to build the largest chip manufacturing place on the planet. Now listen, I don't know if they're going to get it done before the Lord returns. I'm just telling you what their plans are. They're building a metaverse, artificial intelligence building out there for Facebook. So that's what's going to be tracked. And then number 9, by 2030, XR technologies will achieve horizontal convergence. So we'll give them, a small honorable mention on the guest prophecy updater thing because they use the word convergence to drive greater interoperability and portability. And then number 10 will be board meetings will occur in the metaverse by 2023. In the following years, XR will be second nature in terms of the language and operation of government and enterprises to share information and collaborate. Do you see how the whole thing that's happened over the past 2 years has accelerated this? Everybody's having Zoom meetings now. You can work and never go to the office if you're in the right kind of profession. So you kind of combine the draconian financial control with this digital thing, and then you have cryptocurrency to fund it, but to get access to that, you may have to have a digital identity, and so that's why there are these programs to roll out, like we see here from the World Economic Forum, digital identity. By the way, this page was put up back in late 2019. I did a thing on this website on April 1st, 2020. So this is what's going on. Well, let's look at some of the things going on in the Middle East. So I'll mention this. This is kind of related. So we know Israel has these great gas fields off the coast near Haifa in the Mediterranean, Leviathan, Tamar, Dalit gas fields. There's a dispute as to where the border goes. Lebanon says the border should go sort of up to the left, straight out. Israel says no, it should go up that way. And there's a fairly significant chunk of Mediterranean. Well, now here's the problem is there's a lot of a big gas field in that area. Nobody's drilling there. Lebanon needs the money. This is a constant source of complaint. There have been meetings over the past month with Amos Hochstein, who's the energy czar for our State Department. This is a big deal to people. And now we live in a world where gas resources, Russia may just cut it off and say, we got enough money, we'll get by. Sort of like Turkey's the water czar of the Middle East. Turkey, one of the leaders of Turkey once said, hey, you guys drink your oil. We'll buy it from you, but we'll keep our own water. And there's been some, I believe, state inaugurated droughts that have occurred. I mean, there's a major drought occurring along the Euphrates River now. Turkey can shut off the flow of that river. And I think they could probably shut off the flow of the Tigris River. Now we know it also says in Revelation that the Euphrates will dry up. Is that a miraculous thing, or is that just sort of somebody shutting off the overflow gates at the dams in Turkey? We'll see. So here's another map about that. And so Nasrallah and some of his interviews and that type of thing has mentioned this. In this interview on February the 8th, he said that if Israel attacks Iran, Iran would retaliate directly in a hard and violent fashion. While this is going on, I'll talk a little bit more about this when I get into the sanctions thing, but these talks in Vienna, Austria are going on about the Iranian nuclear deal, the new JCPOA. And what's the impact having on Iran? What's the impact that this Russian war, everybody focused on Russia, is having? What's Iran doing in response to that? We'll talk about that in just a moment. I have a couple clips that I want to play for you. So if you want to understand, this is, Nasrallah, he's always out there. This is a February 16th address that he did. And he said, now we have the technology and know-how to turn missiles into precision missiles into manufactured drones locally. And they're being funded by Iran. So what do you think is going to happen in the near term with Iran? Are they going to back off? Or are they going to do what our transportation secretary said the other day? And no, I can't. I'll play it in a minute. Russia is also doing this. This is what happened in Russian airspace. They were flying patrols with Syria along the Golan border. Now, were they doing that to send a message to the West about intervening in the Ukrainian war? This happened back in January, about 6 weeks ago. Or were they sending a message to Israel? In some respects, they might have been doing both. Some people, there's a dispute as to what they're doing. This is a great article from Alma Research and Education Center. You can find them, Alma Israel, that there's really this one front strategy. What do they mean by one front? Everything is a front with Israel. Everything is a war front with Israel. And so there's this, Israel's trying to get this economic corridor, and Iran's trying to get their access through all the way from Iran to the Mediterranean. And that's a battle that's going on that's not often fought out in public. Okay. Turkey is funding things in Jerusalem that are not helpful. Okay, let's talk about Russia, Ukraine, and what does it all mean. So this is the country of Ukraine. That's a pretty big country. If you go from the furthest east part to the furthest west part, it's, I'm going to guess, 850 miles. It's a big country. I'll show you on a map a little bit more. And so Russia took over Crimea back in 2014. There's this separatist controlled area. Originally, this is what Putin said that he wanted to do. I want to take over that. Those are Russian ethnic minorities, Russian-speaking minorities there, and you guys are trying to kill them. And there's, I think, reports I've seen about 14,000 people killed in that area. I think it's on both sides. I don't think it was all Ukrainians killing Russians. I mean, because the Russians are lobbing artillery shells at Ukraine as well. But Donbass and Luhansk regions. And so at the beginning of this invasion, Putin came out and said, those people have declared themselves separate and independent. We recognize that, and we're going to go protect them because they've asked us to help us out. There's also pretty good evidence Russia's doing a strategic takeover of the entire coast that Ukraine has with the Black Sea. They're moving down to the left of Crimea. That's where Odessa is there in that harbor area. They're moving on that. They've effectively got a land bridge now all the way from Russia through the separatist-controlled area down to Crimea. There are important port cities there in southern Ukraine to the right of Crimea, which is the Sea of Azov. That's under the control of Russia now. But here's the Black Sea that you can see. Here's a little bit more of a zoomed out map so you can see Moscow's up there in the north in the middle. See Israel down here in the south. You see Turkey in between. So the question becomes that everybody has. Everybody talks about Ezekiel 38, Gog of Magog, and Meshach, Tubal, and Rosh. And is this Gog Magog? Is Russia Magog? And is Putin Gog? Now, there are different views of this. Some people think that there in the north of Syria, along the Mediterranean, up into Turkey, is where Magog was. So, because when Ezekiel wrote this, he would have thought that this is the northern part. This is the heights. It's a mountain. I want to be very clear when I say this. The way I look at Bible prophecy, maybe it's because I'm a lawyer, is I look at all these different views and I sort of weigh them. But ultimately, my view is, when it happens, we'll know exactly how it works out. And everybody says, oh, well, you're just being weak. So that one view is Magog, is this area in, if you could move it up or zoom out just a little bit, Brian. Yeah, they're the north part of Syria in that little area, that the little finger of Turkey that comes down. That would be what Ezekiel was thinking of when he was writing this prophecy. Could be. You'll see people, I think Michael Heiser has that view. You should know, too, that province there that's in Turkey right now, this is hotly disputed right now. In fact, there were some pretty nasty cables back and forth between Turkey and Syria, because Syria says, Turkey, you took that and it belongs to us. And Turkey has come down along the northern border of Syria there. You see that road? Turkey has, and I've talked about this for years, Turkey has wanted to take over parts of northern Syria, mainly because they want to get rid of the Kurds. And they've done, in some parts of that, ethnic cleansing, and everybody's kind of let them do that. So zoom all the way out. So now you can see Ukraine to the north of the Black Sea, and you see Moscow. So the whole dispute, Putin thinks that Ukraine should really be Russian. Now, originally, he's been saying for a while, I'm just going to take over the separatist regions in the east. But now he seems to be saying, I want all of it. And there's a lot of dispute. Is Putin going mad? Does he have some kind of mental disease? Is he sick? Does he think he's going to die and he just wants to leave a legacy and the Russian people don't like it? There's protests, they're not protests. I think he's doing exactly what he wants to do. I think may not agree with the way he gets there. I think his history is a little bit mixed up, because the Russian Empire really started in Kiev. I'll talk about that in a moment. So he wants to get that, and he says, you guys are threatening me because you expanded NATO to Poland. And so I feel threatened because you're close. Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, those are part of this, and that's not too far. Look how close Moscow is. And you can put missiles there. You're putting offensive missiles there. I don't want you there. And there's, it's a reasonable position. Because the closer a missile is, the less time you have to react to it. Like friends of ours who live in Nahariya in northern Israel, just 6 or 7 minutes drive from the Lebanese border. Like when Hezbollah starts firing rockets, we're toast. Because it's a 6 or 7 minute drive. The missile will make it in less time, and we may not be able to react and get to a shelter. So this is problematic. So Magog is in that area north of Syria. Talking to some Orthodox Jewish friends and others in the Bible prophecy community think that Turkey is Meshach, Tubal, Togarmah. And I talked to an Orthodox Jewish person, religious Orthodox Jewish person just this week, and he said, well, what we're taught is that this Gog Magog comes from eastern Turkey and Georgia. And this is sort of the old area of the northern part of the Assyrian Empire. And then there's research, Doug Hamp's done some research that Gog is Assyrian. And I think it's a view that's worth looking at and considering. I don't think you're a heretic or an idiot if you look at that. Now, the question becomes, what does it really mean? Then there are other people that say, well, by the way, on that, Erdogan, and let's look at it in contemporary news people. Erdogan, the leader of Turkey, he always seems to get away with things. His economy is terrible, but now the mayors of Istanbul, who are much more popular than him, or people that are in charge of Istanbul, are not going to run in the election against him next year, in 2023. And it's almost, sometimes it's almost like there's some kind of supernatural protection on this guy. I don't know. But he does a lot of things, and he seems to get away with it. But his economy is in bad shape, but it doesn't seem to make any difference to him. He said back in 2003, I was reading a research paper this week, he actually said, I am from Georgia. My family is from Georgia. And then they moved in the right part of the Black Sea on the southern shore. There's an area, that's where his family came from, moved to Istanbul, and that's where he was born. So he considers himself Georgian. So listen, is that Magog? People make the case for that. You have to evaluate all of these things. I've entertained that view. I've also entertained the view that Russia is Magog. And when you look at the Table of Nations in Genesis chapter 10 and where the sons of Japheth went, I think you can make a case that Magog is Russia. And Russia's huge. I've seen people refer to documents that say that the Wall of China was known as the ramparts of Magog to protect the Chinese empire from the invasion from Magog. And you can look at historical maps, and they will even there's Gog in that area there in eastern Russia over to Korea. There are maps that have Gog in them. So there's people who make the case that this is Russia. And now I'll probably just say this. Okay, remember one of the things that I talk about that we look at? One of the parts of the grid is logistics. So this week, if you could zoom in on Ukraine there, on Kiev, Russia has gone to Kiev, and they're starting to surround it. You know, you hear about the 40-mile long convoy of tanks and that type of thing that's bogged down. And they seem to be having some supply and logistics problems. I mean, armies need gas for their tank. And I've never driven a tank, but a tank doesn't get the same mileage as a Prius. Okay? They run out of gas. And soldiers need to eat. And there have been reports of soldiers begging for food and that type of thing. So there's a logistics issue that's involved in getting that convoy. And so you're talking 90 miles from where they were in Belarus to the north down into Ukraine, and they're having logistics problem. So zoom all the way out on that. Okay, so now we talk about, so if Russia is Magog, there is a logistics issue if Magog does the Ezekiel 38 invasion. It says that they come with a great company and a mighty army. They and their compatriots, Persia, Libya, put Cush in this invasion. And I'm assuming that this invasion occurs before the Lord returns. Now, there's also a Gog Magog at the end in Revelation that, and there's some reasons why I think they're different. For example, if the battle's at the end, some people say there's only one Gog Magog and it's at the end. Well, there's a principle about dual fulfillment of various prophecies. There's also some details in the Ezekiel 38 and 39 passages about, for example, at the end, that Gog is buried. Some people say, well, it's just Armageddon, but the Gog is the Antichrist, but the Antichrist isn't buried. We know in Revelation the Antichrist is thrown alive into the lake of fire. So there are a lot of these little details, and what I'm trying to say is that all these details are going to work out, and we'll say, that's exactly what the Lord prophesied. Until then, we're sort of in this trying to understand as much as we can. Watching it unfold, if we're in the Word and we understand the Word, it will happen. And then it also says that the weapons are burned for 7 years. And I'm not sure why that would, I can see how that might happen from this final period of time and Armageddon, whenever it happens, into the millennial kingdom, but I don't understand why they would be burning weapons at the end of the millennial kingdom into eternity. That just doesn't square with me. So there's different reasons, and they're technical reasons, and we'll see how it plays out. But listen, you can make the case that Russia is Magog. Now everybody's saying, well, now this is Gog Magog. This is Gog Magog happening. No, it's the mountains of Israel. And if you go from, let's say, from Kiev to the Golan Heights, there's two ways to go. As you notice, there's the Black Sea there. So you either got to go across the Black Sea, but tanks don't really do well in water. Okay, they have a tendency to sink. There's no bridge. So there's a land bridge. They can go from Kiev down through Moldova, and I saw a report, a map that was used by the leader of Belarus that sort of indicated that Russia was going to go into eastern Moldova. There's a thin strip there where Putin's made sort of the same claims that this is ethnic Russian. So you can go down through Moldova, Romania, Bulgaria, to the Aegean Sea. And this is part of the problem too, is that this is the point that I wanted to make. This is the Black Sea. You see Istanbul, and the only way out of the Black Sea for a navy is through the Bosphorus there. Istanbul is on either side of the Bosphorus, the European side, the Asian side. Well, then you go through that little sea, and then you come down to another narrow passageway called the Dardanelles. And Turkey's just opened a very large bridge over the Dardanelles. I think I showed a picture of it a few weeks ago. So the question is that how Russia comes in here and this Gog, if it's Russia's Gog, or whoever is Gog, if they're coming from up in that area, and if that's Magog, Ukraine is probably part of that, ethnically. And these people had a pretty, I'll say, nasty reputation in ancient history, and probably why the Great Wall of China was built, to keep out these people. And that's a big wall. Now, there's a theory that in the Caucasus region, and that's the other way that they can come down into Russia, is through the Caucasus. Let's see here. I have... Well, this is what happens when you don't feel good on Saturday and you don't get all your slides in order. So the Caucasus, that's where Georgia is, Chechnya, and Russia did a thing this week. They had Chechnya since they invaded Ukraine. They had a big problem with Chechnya back in the 90s or early 2000s. They went into Grozny and just leveled the place. I mean, leveled it. The pictures of what happened in Grozny are remarkably similar to the pictures we see now coming out of Ukraine. They're just bombing apartment buildings. And by the way, this is not a fake war, okay? Everybody is a war analyst on the internet. And sometimes you have to let these things play out. So I saw pictures and they said, look at these Ukrainians, they have wooden guns. This is all fake. They're trying to fool us. No, those were pictures of Ukrainian people training civilians, and they were using a wooden gun to show them how to handle it rather than a real gun. Sometimes there's a perfectly simple, logical explanation for this. And everybody says, oh, well, it's all fake. There's no war. They're doing, and I'm sorry, there's a real war going on. Real people are dying. And if Russia comes in like they've threatened to do, this, pray for the Ukrainian missionaries and mission agencies that are trying to get people out and that sort of thing, because it's going to be awful. So the other way for Russia, if it's Magog, to come down would be, sorry, here, hang on a second here.
France and South Korea have also got evacuation.
I'll tell you. The phone is so sensitive. Is through the Caucasus. But the Caucasus are this huge mountain range. That's where Mount Ararat is. It's like 18,000 feet high. There are a bunch of other peaks there that are 18,000 feet or 19,000 feet high. It's hard to get a tank up and down mountains like that and through valleys. So that's a land bridge thing, but that's a logistic thing. And if you want to go from Ukraine to Georgia, there's a city there called Tbilisi, and some people say, well, that's Tubal. Tbilisi, Tubal, they sort of sound alike. Could be. But that distance to go around the top of the Black Sea and down there, that's like 800 miles. And then when you get to Georgia, and Russia's taken over a couple provinces in Georgia back in 2008, South Odessa, and the other one begins with an A, that's up along the Black Sea, because they were ethnic Russian. So Putin has been very consistent for 20 years as to how he's done things. And it's sort of like, why did nobody believe him when he said, well, I don't like Ukraine, I don't like what you're doing in Ukraine, and we have ethnic Russian areas. We have ethnic Russian area in this little sliver of Moldova, he claims. Why do we not believe that he's doing everything that he's said for years that as to what he's going to do? But that's a very difficult, and then from Georgia down to Israel, that's 900 miles. So that's 1,700 miles. So think of the logistics. A 40-mile convoy of tanks has issues. What's a 1,700-mile convoy going to do on logistics? So that's all I'm saying is that's why I talk about logistics. Now, maybe it's a different kind of army. Maybe this is the end of tank warfare because they're giving Javelin missiles to the Ukrainians and they're taking out a lot of tanks. Because every tank can be hacked. And their tanks are not as good as the American M1 tanks. So that's the issue. So now we talk about the sanctions. Well, here are just some newspaper reports. NATO does this, put his nuclear forces on alert. He's taken over these parts of Ukraine. And you can see he's kind of got the land bridge there now in the south. That's for another time. And the UN this week, they voted to condemn Russia. And here are the this is the vote, 140 in favor, 5 against, 34 abstentions. Here's the UN vote at the General Assembly. And then here's a map. So the green is what voted to condemn Russia. The red are the ones who did not. You see, Syria did not. They voted against condemning Russia. The green voted to do it. The yellow abstained, and look at where the countries are that abstain. So United Arab Emirates, I believe, voted to condemn them, but other countries in the Mideast did not. So that's a good map to show how things are going. The war has been terrible for the Ukrainians. Battling, many people have died. But this plan that seemed to be claims that he was going to do this in 48 hours did not. So now there's this question about, this is from the Financial Times yesterday, an editorial. By the way, a news site that I use quite a bit in my research and reading has been down pretty much for 4 days now. It was the victim of a cyber attack. This is another issue. This is a different type of warfare. And, the cyber attack can be very devastating. I mean, look, my inconvenience of not being able to get some of the newspapers I like to read, but what if it's a power grid? So here's what this article says. They're wondering whether a similar chain reaction might occur as a result of Western sanctions on Russian institutions. We are dealing with pipelines here, financial and real. One analyst told his clients, if you jam the flows by making Russian banks unable to receive and send payments, you have a problem. When a tri-party clearing bank did not return cash to money funds for fear of ending up with an intraday exposure to Lehman. They compare it to what happened back when Lehman Brothers collapsed. So a lot of people say, well, the solution, I talked about this 4 weeks ago on the East Med pipeline, the East Med pipeline, well, Israel can just sell gas to Europe. That'll replace what they're getting from Russia. But that's the problem, is in that trench there between Cyprus and Crete, that trench is that they have to do a pipeline through is 3,000 meters deep. That's a pretty significant depth to operate at and to engineer. So they're not going to do this. And so the estimated time to build that is 5 to 10 years at a cost of $6 to $10 billion. Now the question becomes, and I played you the clips of Amos Hochstein from the US State Department and other analysts in Europe, we don't want fossil fuel stuff anymore. You won't get an ESG score if you're a bank financing a pipeline for fossil fuels. We don't do that. Well, that just elevates the power that Russia has, and Iran. Turkey, they want the pipeline to go across them because they'll get a cut. There's talk about, this is an article this week in the Jerusalem Post, can Israel become Europe's gas supplier? And the answer is maybe, maybe not. But right now, the East-Med pipeline is not happening. And then other people say, well, we can go down here to Egypt, which has port to, and there's a pipeline from Israel down to Egypt, and they can do liquefied natural gas. And we'll just ship it to Europe. Well, that requires what? Ships, right? There's a shortage of ships. Qatar has a tremendous liquefied natural gas capacity, but all their gas over in the Persian Gulf is spoken for a while. They have long-term contracts. And also, what's easier to attack if you're a terrorist or you want to do damage? A pipeline that's 3,000 meters deep in the ocean? That's pretty hard. Not about the only person that could do that maybe is Russia and the United States. But a ship, that's a whole different thing. You got one hypersonic missile hitting that baby and you got a big bomb. I remember back in 2002, I was working a lot, spent a couple hundred days a year in Boston on a case. And then one day I had a little extra time, so I thought, I'll take the ferry over across from Rose Wharf over to the airport, across Boston Harbor. And I had some extra time, I had an extra hour. Well, I didn't know that when I get halfway across, the boat has to go back almost to shore, and I can't get off because they're bringing in a liquefied natural gas ship through the harbor there because they're afraid of terrorist attacks. So I sit on that boat for like 2.5 hours. Now I barely make my flight. But see, because terrorists could attack that, that's the point. And now Iran is using this to its advantage. And then this is Pete Buttigieg interviewed on MSNBC on the 11th hour the other day. Hey, what about replacement gas supplies? And listen to what he says.
Rising the Keystone Pipeline, working something out with Iran.
I mean, look, the president has said that all options are on the table, but we also need to make sure that we're not galloping after permanent solutions to immediate short-term problems where more strategic and tactical actions in the short term can make a difference.
Okay, so she says, well, what about, can we redo the Keystone Pipeline? That would replace the Russian oil gas we're getting. Well, that was shut down day one of the Biden administration. And I always like when some of these people in the Biden administration, they're asked a question, it's sort of like they're waiting for, they're searching their hard drive to find the answer that they've been programmed to give, because you can kind of see this, you can see the wheels turning in there a little bit, if they're turning at all. And so the sanction's going to work. Who knows? The other thing that you're seeing is, this is from, I think, Seth Frantzman. He's done some great analysis recently. Is Russia's doing war? How does that translate over to Israel? What's Israel going to learn from that? This is something else. This is related to what I did at the beginning. Now they're rolling out, have you seen this? Even red states are rolling this out in the United States, smart health cards with all your health information on them, including whether you've had the state-approved treatment. And you'll get a smart health card. And I always love it when they say this, easily share this information with others if you choose. Yeah, like they're not going to tell you to do it, which they've been doing all along. That's concerning. So the technology, all this technology is being rolled out. It's this convergence of events. Then this is a David Goldman in Asia Times writing, and the question is, what's going to happen to the price of gold and other commodities? Look at these. These are some of the magazine covers. Putin's tracks, the return of history. That's New Time magazine, New Newsweek. lot of concern about Moscow, Jerusalem. Will they continue to work together in Syria? That's open to debate. Naftali Bennett did go and meet with Putin in the Kremlin yesterday. Not a lot of information as to what they talked about, but they're trying to continue that cooperation where, look, we can take out Iranian missile targets. And that may continue. The Russian embassy sort of indicated that it would. Another good article that I think plays into Bible prophecy, Saudi Arabia, whether they're going to join the Abraham Accords, a big article in the Atlantic by Graham Wood, the cover article for next month's magazine, Absolute Power, the Crown Prince of Murder and the Future of Saudi Arabia. And in there, he does make some statements. Like, for example, he says that America and Saudi Arabia have a real synergy. He also says that I consider Israel to be an ally. And some of the people say, well, how much does that mean? But look at this one. This is kind of interesting. The Trump administration's support when MBS was at its most vulnerable saved him. If MBS ultimately becomes king, he owes no one bigger than who? Jared Kushner, Trump's personal envoy to the Crown Prince. One Saudi analyst said this: you Americans think there is something strange about a ruler who sends his unqualified son-in-law to conduct international relations. For us, this is completely normal. And so the question is he going to become? And so I'll talk more about this in the future, the Saudi family tree. And, there's been some other crown princes that have died. They mostly died. There's only one crown prince who kind of got rid of the other one, and that's been Mohammed bin Salman. Now, he's not going to do anything different. He's not going to join the Abraham Accords or change Saudi Arabia's position on the Palestinian issue as long as his father's alive. That's just not going to happen. But because he said, I view Israel as more of an ally in this situation, the Iranians are upset. Iranian security chief reminds Saudi Arabia of who is the enemy of Muslims and Arabs. And then there were these Arabic language papers in Lebanon. This is an article called Russia versus America. Will Putin return Ukraine to its historical borders? Why is that important to Hezbollah? Well, we want to restore it to the historical borders too. Well, is it the Ottoman borders? Is it the pre-Ottoman borders? Is it the area of Iran that had a big caliphate? I mean, where do you go back in history? And this is sort of the flaw in what he had to say. And so now there's been this video that was released just the other day of a big missile base, underground missile base. Look at this. So this is Iran. And so this is how there's sort of a synergy here about how warfare changes. And now everybody's doing missiles and there's drones. And I have no reason to believe that these are not real missiles. I don't think these are dummies because I see them fired. I see them used. And you'll see here in a minute. And so here we are. Look, we don't care who's in charge. This is how we're going to respond to things. And they're getting what they want out of the United States. The United States is now talking about buying oil from Iran. Well, what do you think they're going to do with their nuclear program? Program. And see how they take us back to Soleimani? Now, some of their missile tests fail. They're not perfect yet. But guess what? Every failed missile test puts them closer to the ones that don't, that will work. So you see here's the Martyr Wall that they have in these underground missile bases, Soleimani on the left and some of the other Iranian martyrs. And then they're going to show how they launch multiple drone missiles. They have they're almost like racks of drones that they launch. Should be coming up here in a moment. So this stuff's underground. This stuff is hard to bomb and get at. I mean, this is pretty big. Look at all the big trucks, missile launchers, that type of thing they have. And then you'll see, I think the next segment or next clip is the drone launching. I forgot how long these guys were. Somebody, there you go. You see the rack of drones there? And then you'll see how that's taken out and they launch those. And then this is sort of clips some of the other things they do. They have like a picture of the Israeli reactor at Dimona that is talking about it. That's you'll see it destroyed here. It's a model that they made up. And they're sending a message about this is what we can do. There's the Dimona reactor, and you can see there. We need to hire them to do some of our prophecy update graphics. So this is all a lot of this is, so the question becomes, what does this mean for Israel? Because we know Israel is central in Bible prophecy. Here's another article from a Lebanese paper. Regional and global changes. The Israeli entity is practically temporary. And so you see here, look again. This is Israel going down. See the 2022, 2030, there's that date again, 2035. And this is part of what they're feeding to people. Munich Security Conference had a thing. Zelensky spoke at that. Their key points were that we need to come together in unity. In fact, here's the title of it, Unity in a Time of Upheaval. Guterres was there, and he said this: I am often asked whether we are in a new Cold War. My answer is that the threat to global security now is more complex and possibly higher than at that time. And we sit here and we say, well, how did all of this happen? How did we just get here? There's a great article in the here's London Times. Gas is still flowing. Good graphic from the Financial. I think this is from the Financial Times, London Times, about Putin. Here's an article in Wall Street Journal yesterday. Ukraine has accused Russia of using thermobaric weapons. These are one step below a nuclear weapon. So I would not, when Putin says he'll use thermonuclear weapons, I would believe it. These weapons are devastating, and there's some allegations that he's already used them in Ukraine. And this is a historical, you can stop the video and freeze this if you want to look at it, sort of a historical map of how Ukraine came into being. And, part of it was Russia gave it to Ukraine under Lenin gave some of it back, Khrushchev gave some of it back. And Putin's now saying, listen, I want it all back. And so this article in yesterday's Wall Street Journal, the two blunders that caused the Ukraine war, that's sort of a historical map of what it looked like originally. You see the Black Sea there, the original kingdom. And this article is very good if you can find it. I'll try to put a link in the show notes. I don't know if it'll work because it's probably behind a paywall, but we didn't believe Putin. Putin was upset. And things were done, like last year, there was an agreement signed with Ukraine saying they're going to become part of NATO. That triggered Putin. Now, the question is his response. This is from The Atlantic, Putin's new Ukraine essay. In response to that, he wrote like a 5,000-word essay sort of going through the history of everything, which he recounted in his speech on February 21st. And the question is, what do they want to accomplish? So here's my map on the Caucasus. You see how that mountain ridge in through there. Very high ridge. That's the areas of Georgia that Russia took over. Seth Franzman has a good article in Jerusalem Post. Friday, I think it appeared, how the Russia-Ukraine war might lead to conflict in the Middle East. I would highly recommend that you go read that. Iran is probably going to use it to heat things up. I'm going to play just a couple minutes of this. This is Caroline Glick, David Wormser, and David Bryan. He's the husband of Shoshana Bryan. I listened to a webinar with her this week about the situation. They're talking about what's the impact on Iran.
And, looking at what's happening in Ukraine from Israel and also from the Gulf, you see that a lot of countries are hedging their bets and not wanting to side with either side too clearly. The Americans asked the UAE and the Saudis to support them in their support for Ukraine, and both of them abstained from doing so. And Israel, the government, has been massively criticized by the Likud for condemning Russia's invasion of Ukraine. But also there's a larger question of how this thing can play out in the Middle East with Russia in Syria and in alliance with Iran, and the United States also moving towards Iran. So let's start with you, David, on this round, which will probably be our last because we have gone over our hour.
Well,
It
I think,
happens.
whatever happens in Ukraine, Putin's not coming out of this with satisfaction. The assumption is he wanted the whole country. It's going to be difficult for him to take the whole country now. And this is a man who understands the power of perception of strength. And as a result, I think he's going to look now to reassert and rehabilitate his image of toughness and strength. Unfortunately, I think that Israel's facing, I think it's reaching its red lines on both Hezbollah and Lebanon and with Iran. And so we're headed for some sort of a nonlinear progression in either. And this is a place now where Russia, if before Ukraine they could have stomached some things, I don't think Russia's in a position now to allow its allies to be battered, because it will look too bad coming off of Ukraine. So I think what you're seeing is a far more dangerous Russia in Syria and Iran for Israel than there was, and yet at the same time the United States is abandoning Israel. I mean, let's be clear here. The United States is coordinating with Russia to help Iran when Israel sees that as a rapid and fast ramp to nuclear success for Iran. This is so Israel's facing a situation of increased isolation, promises that have been betrayed, and no expectation of defense. At the same time that they're facing a Russia that is much more likely to make a stand against Israel on behalf of their allies than they were 2 weeks ago.
Where do you take this, Stephen?
Stephen Bryan, I'm sorry.
I was just thinking that if I were the Saudis or the UAE, I wouldn't be very happy either. I mean, it seems to me because they're fighting a very bad war in Yemen, where they're not doing very well, and probably have very little prospects of being other than holding the line. They can't do much more. It's because the Iranians keep feeding the missiles and the UAVs and everything else, the suicide drone.
So you can go to Caroline Glick's YouTube channel, episode 41, excellent hour and a half. Give her the guest prophecy updater title this week. David Wormser, assisted by Stephen Bryan. And remember, I participate in briefings with a group called IDSF, the Israeli Defense and Security Forum. I was contacted by them through a friend to help set up, so I've gotten a number of pastors and Bible prophecy guys to get these. We've had a couple briefings now. We hope to do them weekly, maybe even more as the situation goes. They're retired IDF officers, reserve officers, retired officers, and then also people from Shin Bet and the Mossad also participate with the group. So we had our second briefing the other day, and General Amir Avivi, the founder of IDSF, he made the point that, listen, and this is something I've talked about for 7 years at least, that Russia has a demographic problem. They have a low birth rate. Germany has a low birth rate. Britain has a low birth rate. There's a demographic wall that people are running into. And when you kind of layer that with Bible prophecy, I think it makes it more likely to happen in the near term than far out or far away time, a long time away. But you also need to know that Russia has a Muslim problem. Muslim birth rates are 2.5 to 7 in their communities. And so now General Avivi said, which confirms what I've been saying for a long time, is right now Russia has 25% of its total population is Muslim. Now, how does that play into whether somebody comes against Israel? You understand? I've said that. I've been saying that for 20 years. And now the demographics support it. 40% of the Russian army is Islamic, Muslim. 40% today, right now. And so in the briefing, he also had on Anat Hochberg, Marone, I think her name is, Dr. Anat, we will call her. She's a terror expert. And I think you should listen to just the first part of what she says. You can go to the IDSF YouTube channel and get this video. We'll try to put a link in the show notes on YouTube to see this, or you can email me and I'll send you a link to it. It's a wonderful briefing. I mean, I know Bill Koenig and Prophecy Watchers did a video about it already. Because we're sitting there, it's like, wow, we think about Bible prophecy and the pages of Bible prophecy, and it's like, wow. I mean, so here's what she said, and if I don't get to the part where she's at, I think it's near the beginning of what she says, you need to understand that what's happened over the last 10 days has been very significant in world history, as well as, I think, moving the clock on Bible prophecy.
Today, so thank you very much in advance, Amir, and all of you that just gathered together to have this important meeting. I would like to share with you something that just happened 10 days ago, if I'm not wrong, or 9 days ago, because I don't have the hours and the time already, because almost I don't sleep so well lately. And it was last Tuesday morning at 6 a.m. that I was called by one of the Tel Aviv and Israeli TV media producer that asked me to wake up, and he's very sorry to wake me up at 6 o'clock and said, Russia invaded to Ukraine. This is the beginning of a new era. You have to wake up and be with us noontime and to have some commentary regarding what Russia is doing and what's going on here. And I must share with you this experience, which just shows us that the address is on the wall for a couple of months or years. And I think the West, all of us in the West, may be, I would say it very cautiously, but put it forward, are they kind of maybe ignorance or a time of illusion that Russia does not have any intention to invade Ukraine. And I would put it straightforward. Russia had planning for 20 years. It's a very detailed strategic plan, not only to conquer Ukraine, but I would say it's, again, cautiously here, to have a turning point in the international order and to I wouldn't say topple the hegemony of the US, but to change the international order. And it's a lot more, it's wider and very complicated issue. Once we have to wake up and see, like a wake-up call, and see that what we had 10 days ago, it's not what we have today, and not what we are going to face in the near future. And if we look at the strategic way of attacking Ukraine, we all witness some kind of aggressive and I would say, militaristic, nihilistic way of occupy with conquer, I would say, Ukraine, and put aside all the international law and all the stuff and all the other issues concerning the international norms, laws, etc., etc. It's an aggressive way to put a new world order and to expect from the West to understand what's going on here. I know it's very tough to maybe to grasp it, maybe to digest it, but from my point of view, as more than 20 years of academic research, Russia, the West, and China as well. I mean, the geopolitical hegemony entities in the international order. I would say that, from my point of view, it's not a surprise. It's more than it. It's a surprise. We are in the West do not understand what's going on.
Well, you can go get that. I would highly recommend you listen to Dr. Anand. She was just absolutely wonderful, as was General Amir Avivi and his comments. I mean, you heard what she said. The world, somebody called her and said, Russia invaded Ukraine. We are in a new era. You need to wake up and get out of bed. Because the world we knew when we went to bed last night, it's a different world order now, and that is part of what Putin is doing. He doesn't want Ukraine. He wants to break NATO. So what happens to NATO? Well, maybe NATO will shrink, but NATO's not going to do anything. Germany has like 50 tanks that work. Russia has 12,000, or did have 12,000. I mean, nobody's going in there physically to rescue the Ukrainians. And Ukraine has its own problems. We could set a laundry list of things that they've done bad. But there's innocent people, Jewish, Christian, and otherwise, that are getting killed. And my fear is it's going to be very bloody. And so this is the way things are going to go in Bible prophecy. Things are going to change quickly, rapidly. Supply chains are going to break. Wheat is going through the roof. Somebody asked me the other day, should I go store up some food? I'm like, if you wait till Friday, you've probably waited too long. If you wait till next week, maybe. And I'm not trying to be an alarmist, but I'm just telling you, this is the reality of the world that we live in. We live in a world where the existing order of the world, America's a great superpower and liberal world order hegemony. It's over. It's over. And now there's a battle. Okay, so I don't think Russia and the World Economic Forum are working together. You've got these bad people that want to control everything. Currency, we've seen what they've done. They're on one side. Russia's on the other. China's kind of straddling the fence a little bit. They support Russia, but I think, what are they going to do? I mean, eventually they may say, hey, we can go after Ukraine. Nobody's going to do anything. We got a free pass. The world changed. The world order changed. Now there is a battle between two. That's how I view it. And we can argue, is Russia right or whatever. I have problems with people who think that Russia's right. But I understand where they're coming from. And I think in some respects they were provoked. And Ukraine's probably not the best country to hold up as a shining example of everything. But there are real people that live there, and there are real people in our world there right now. But look at the conflicts: China, India, in the border, China in the South China Sea against everybody, North Korea against Japan, all these other disputes that are going on, our southern border falling apart. We live in a world where the reality is that people's eternal destiny can be determined in a very short period of time, just like that. So what do we do? Well, we need to stand up for what's right. We need to be in the Word. We need to put on the armor of God. We need to stand up and act like men, and we need to tell people the good news of the gospel of Jesus Christ and the fact, part of that message today more than ever, your feet shod with the gospel of peace. Part of that message. I believe this look, the gospel is you believe in Jesus and you're saved, but part of the message is Jesus is coming back to fix it. That's the gospel of peace that I think Paul's referring to in Ephesians 6. Not a different gospel, okay? It's part of the message. So don't anybody say I'm preaching a second gospel. No, it's part of the message. It's in Ephesians 6, the armor of God passage. Feet shod with this. It means something. Because part of the message, part of the hope we bring for people if they get saved is, listen, Jesus is coming. And he's going to make it right. And we need to look forward to that day. Okay, amen. Let's pray. Lord, thanks so much. Lord, give us the strength, the courage, the wisdom, and the opportunities to share the glorious gospel of Jesus Christ and the message, the full message of how to be saved and the benefits that will flow from that and the knowledge that the Lord will return in glory to fix everything. We look forward to that day, but Lord, in the meantime, help us to stand firm in difficult times. Bless us today in Jesus' name. Amen.